Escape from Tarkov's PvE mode has been viewed as both a blessing by a ton of players and a curse by a ton of others. And so today's video we're going to kind of delve into some of the main reasons why this is, as well as what sort of player base PvE mode really is trying to attract, and kind of discover whether or not it is worth new players playing the PvE mode versus some of the older players, and just get a good feel for the overall opinion based on Tarkov Pve. And so I'd be interested to see your thoughts on the mode. Have you played it? Are you completely stone cold against it? Do you think that the price is the big point? Do you think it's the fact that you're just playing against AI? I'm really interested to see your thoughts. But in terms of this video, let's delve into the main issue, or at least the main thing that a lot of people are saying is that the player base is now divided into two: people who play PvE and people that play PvP. And a lot of people are making this link that if you play PvE, that's because you're bad, and if you play PvP, that's because you're good at the game. Whereas this really isn't necessarily true, and of course you have a wide variety of people that play both modes, which people don't seem to highlight that yes, people play both modes depending on their situation at the time and whether or not they're bored of the PvP, which I think is probably the biggest reason right now why so many people are playing the PvE mode. And so if you look at that in its kind of isolation, the amount of players playing PvE right now, according to a lot of polls on the internet, both on Reddit and also through people who have a big audience on the game, such as Hostility and that sort of thing, you're seeing that there is, of course, a vast majority on the PvE, more so than the PvP. But of course, this is not necessarily a true reflection of what BSG will see in their own statistics as to where the player base is playing. But it gives us a good indication that a lot of people are playing PvE, dragging away players from the PvP servers, which means that a lot of the raids within PvP have been severely kind of reduced in terms of the player numbers, and they're feeling a little bit more dead, which is entirely true. But there's also that kind of counter argument that there is also the PvP wipe coming soon, and it's the late wipe of Tarkov. So with that being said, I think a lot of players forget that there is also the cycle of Tarkov in its entirety anyway, whereby it kind of phases out towards the end. Lots of less players actually playing the game, lots of less hype around the game, and so less people are going to be playing the game at the end of a wipe, which is probably why we're seeing lower and lower player numbers. Now, this has probably been accentuated any more than any other wipe due to the fact that people are now jumping onto PvE and playing that. But that doesn't really give an idea as to why people hate the PvE mode if they play PvP, and why some PvE players are just making very bold statements saying that the PvP wipes or PvP mode is full of cheaters, etc., which I don't think is entirely true. Of course, there are going to be way more cheaters that can impact your game on the PvP mode because there's no actual other players on the PvE mode, hence because it's a solo singular player game. But of course that doesn't really give an indication as to how many cheaters there are, and also a lot of people are saying that people are cheating when they're really not. We've definitely seen the amount of cheaters within the game. It's a ton, and they're probably more effective in terms of how annoying they are within the game because of the fact that, you know, you lose your stuff if you die to a cheater. If you play, you know, Call of Duty, you're playing Valorant, you're playing X-Defiant, you're playing all of these other first-person shooters. If there's a cheater on the enemy team, you know, you die, you leave the game, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's only really that one game that's been affected. It's not ideal, but you can kind of go on. Whereas on Tarkov, of course, you lose your stuff and the cheater then takes your stuff, which is even worse because now you've lost all your gear. So that definitely has an impact in what people think about the whole cheater situation, which is some reasoning behind why people are playing PvE. But another reason is, I think probably the main one, is that it's just a more casual mode. People can hop on, there is no time gating, there is no wipes, at least from what Nikita has said with the PvE mode at this moment in time, which means that, you know, maybe they change it later on down the line, but probably not. Hopefully anyway, because I think that's just going to anger absolutely everyone, given that it was sold as kind of a no wipe game mode. But yeah, a lot of people are wanting that casual aspect, which Tarkov on the PvP side doesn't really have. You're kind of focused on really trying to grind out your character as quickly as possible, and then that leads to a lot of burnout with a lot of players, which is why the server populations on PvP decline quite fast after the first month or two of the wipe beginning. Now, that is obviously happens on any game when there's some new hype, there's a new update, there's a big update, there's a major thing that's changed. It usually happens anyway. So whether that is just a burnout or whether it's because of the game design, we don't really know, and I think it's a very hard topic to kind of really get into grips with. But of course, PvE actually being released is a big drawing factor to a lot of people to kind of come in and test out the game again in a no risk really situation where you've got insurance, it comes back 100% unless you're playing labs. You've got, you know, basic AI that you can learn, and once you've learnt them, they're not really too difficult to deal with, depending on your skill level, how long you've been playing the game, how much time you've got to actually sink into the PvE mode to learn the AI mechanics, and that really kind of gives you a good idea and a good basis as to why people play the PvE mode. But I don't get why people hate between the two modes. I mean, it's the same game, and for me, I'm gonna play PvP, I'm going to play PvE. It really is just a case of what do I find fun at that moment in time. The great thing about PvE right now is it's almost like its own mini wipe. It has been since it was first released, where you can start all over again and kind of work your way through. But of course with PvP, you are always in that circular PvE wipe, or PvP wipe even, and so every single 6 months or however long they're going to do the wipe, it's always constantly in that loop. This wipe in particular has been very long in terms of its timeline compared to some of the other wipes we've had previously, which has probably not helped with the player base numbers. As people get bored, they complete all of the tasks, they'll get themselves to all of the high trader levels, etc. And that really drags it out. But the hostility between the two is really coming down to the fact that I think a lot of players are finding the server populations coming down quite low within the PvP mode. People for some reason getting an ego boost by kind of crapping on other people that play a different mode on the same game. I mean, I don't really understand the whole logic by that, because at the end of the day, what does it matter really to you? It's not really affecting you, and as soon as the PvP wipe comes out, I'm sure the same people will be having a ton of fun playing up against the PvE players who have just jumped back into PvP to play that, as that is probably the majority of people who are playing PvE having that kind of, I guess, casual experience at this moment in time, and then moving into the PvP. I also think that PvE is a brilliant place to actually learn the game if you're brand new to the game or you haven't had a huge amount of hours within it. If you're under 200 hours, PvE is probably one of the best way to kind of learn the game, and I think a lot of people are just saying that people want an easier Tarkov. I think a lot of people just want to learn the game so they can then actually play the game, because it's not particularly too easy to learn the game of Tarkov, as I'm sure literally most of you do already know, that you know you can spend 600 hours and still not be amazingly good at the game, and equally you can spend 1,000 hours and still not be particularly good, and it really is a long learning process. And so jumping into the PvE mode to learn the maps, to learn typical locations on the maps, where the loot locations are, how to just be in gunfights, the movement system, the different gun weapon attachments, trying those out, and also, you know, when new weapons come into the game, they're pretty much accessible straight away if you've leveled up your PvE character, which I think is also a big draw for a lot of players, to go in and actually be able to buy that new weapon straight away, rather than, you know, maybe the weapon comes out at the beginning of wipe, like we're going to see with the M60 and the Desert Eagle and all of these other weapons, the SR3M that's coming in with the next wipe. And so with that being said, you're going to be able to buy them almost instantly, provided they're not locked behind a quest. But even then, if that quest is linked to another quest that you've already completed, you don't have to go through all of those hoops to be able to unlock it and buy it and get it in your game, which I think is going to be a big bonus to everyone that is playing PvE and testing out those weapons so they know what is the best for when they jump into the PvP, or if they're playing PvP currently during a wipe, for example, and then a new weapon or a new item or something comes out, they can test it really quickly, get to grips with it, and then jump back onto PvP and and then grind it out to get whatever that item is, without having a long and arduous grind. So I think that's also a big reason why people play the PvE mode compared to the other one. I really tried to understand the logic in what people think about why they get so angry at people that play PvE mode, for example, versus the PvP mode, why there is such a big animosity towards PvE players in general, because at the same time you look at other games, something like GTA 5 for example, you're not going to get triggered because someone's playing the storyline. I mean, compare the two things, they're pretty much the same sort of story. It's the same base core mechanics, it is the same game. Obviously online you're going to be playing with different players, you've got different events and stuff like that. I'm not stupid, but what I'm saying is the core game, you know, your movement, everything about it is the exact same. So you're not going to get angry about someone playing, you know, a more casual experience where, you know, you just drive around or do whatever you want to do on the single player version, which is just the campaign. And you can say that for literally every single game out there that does have a multiplayer and a single player. It's that I just don't really see why people get so angry. It's not like there is a big, you know, thing about it. It's not like if you play PvE you're a satanic worshipper or something like this. There's literally nothing like that. And if you do hate on PvE play, I'm interested to see why, because I don't really see any real reason other than, you know, maybe you like dumping on people that play PvE. I don't know, maybe it's just keyboard warring, I don't actually know. So I'm interested to see what that opinion actually is. But I think that is pretty much what I wanted to talk about today, and kind of dispel some of the rumours, kind of talk about the whole situation and find out your opinions, because of course that can inform me as to what kind of content you actually want to see in the future, the sorts of things you're really working on with regards to both PvP and PvE, and what sort of things you want to see on Escape from Tarkov videos in the future. I also think as one kind of positive of PvE as a PvP player is it is a ground at which Tarkov and BSG themselves can test things before it comes live into a PvP server that can affect your gameplay. So you'll probably see that there's a lot of tested experiences, tested AI that will, you know, get moved into PvP and stuff like that, that will then come in. But because it's already been tested, they've already got feedback, they've worked on it during that PvE phase where it comes out, they'll transition and it'll be a much smoother transition than when they first bring it out on PvE. So I think it's a very good stomping grounds for Tarkov and BSG to actually implement some new features with a very limited risk. And of course when you're playing a single player game, you're not going to get too angry that they make some AI changes, provided that they're not absolutely broken and become a serious problem. But it becomes a range at which, you know, PvE players get an exclusive, but it might not be as good as when it goes into the PvP mode, but it will get worked upon and they both end up in the same level anyway. So that's kind of where I think the PvE mode is also a good positive for PvP players in going forward and into the future and into 1.0 and everything all around. So yeah, just a couple of things I want to talk about today and see what your reactions are. And I will see you in the next video. Subscribe for more. Goodbye.